Good evening, listeners, and welcome once again to our show. I have a letter here from a man named Christopher. I have not had time to properly read it, as it only arrived this morning. Most of the letters I have read out have been written to the station. This one, however, was delivered to my home address, and there's nothing written on the envelope. This Christopher knows where I live. I don't know exactly how I should feel about this, but I think scared is appropriate. However, he is not the only person of questionable moral intent who knows my home address and who seems to reside on this island. I will keep ever vigilant, but I am not fearful. At least not as fearful as maybe I should be. Let's hope Christopher can shine some light on the strange happenings, and maybe he can provide some answers as to the questions surrounding my mother. Dear Priscilla, I was once known as Christopher. Christopher was a husband. He was a father to 2 little children. He lived on this island with his family, and like you, he saw the things that lurked in the shadows, the things that should have driven him mad, and well, they did eventually. Or I wouldn't be writing this letter now. Christopher is gone, dead. I am what remains. Don't mourn the dead man. I am much more than he ever was. I see things and understand things like that little cramped mind never could. I am better than he ever was. I know this all sounds mad. You know what I am, and in some small part of your mind locked away in that little box, you know who I am. I bet you're just praying you're wrong. My story starts when I was to investigate the disappearance of one Bartholomew Sage. I was a private eye. Apparently the police had labelled it a cold case, so his wife came to me, Miss Wilhelmina Sage. She had short hair that had the colour and texture of straw. It was pulled back into a tight bun at the nape of her neck. She swept into my office and fixed me with a stare that could freeze the steam off a boiling kettle, and demanded to know why I hadn't answered her call. It was 8:30 on a Monday morning, and my office wasn't usually open until 9. I had told her I had only just got in and that I was trying to cut my hours since my wife was working full-time and our 2 children were on summer holidays. If this moved her, she did not show it. She did, however, offer me money, enough to cover nursery bills for 6 months on top of my hourly rate, and how could I say no? The story was Bartholomew took a yacht out to visit the mainland. By all accounts, he did this quite often. However, the next day, his boat was found back moored on the docks. What was strange was that alongside of his boat, carved into the painted wood, was a phrase. Bartholomew was not found. That's not to say that I don't know where he is. I know exactly where he is. I just no longer care. And I doubt his family would want him back, the state he is in. He, much like Christopher, is dead and gone in all but the most literal sense of the word. Now, I scoured his boat and found nothing. No clue as to what happened apart from those words, carved into the wood. I stood on the shore and crouched down to peer at the phrase scrawled along the side of the boat, and as I did, I felt something shift behind me. I froze as whatever was there leaned in. "Another one is mine," it whispered. The spell broke and I stood and spun around on the spot. There was nothing there. Of course there wasn't. It was never there. It didn't exist. It was all in my imagination. These delusions. They had been getting worse recently. I turned back to the boat and realised the scratches in the paint carved out the same words I had just heard. And that proved it. Just my mind playing tricks on me. Another one is mine. Living on an island like ours, I've heard that phrase, or a phrase similar, "The sea has claimed another life," at least a dozen times. Could this be someone's sense of humour? A twisted joke? If so, who would interfere in an active crime scene in order to play a joke like this? It seemed the police had no answers and I wasn't faring any better. Next, I decided to speak to Paul Utteridge and his girlfriend Adeline Ryman. They had reportedly seen his boat leave the dock whilst they sat on the beach. I can't remember the entire conversation, but I do still have my notes. Paul said he and Adeline had been sitting on the beach after having gone for a swim. Adeline said she saw him walking up the dock to his boat and getting in, and said there was nothing off about his demeanour. They both noticed his boat leaving the dock, but neither of them paid much attention to the boat, nor did they see it crash. It was all seeming rather unfruitful until Paul mentioned something about seeing a passenger. Adeline said she did not notice anyone else with Mr. Sage and that he was certainly alone as he walked over to his boat. Paul said he didn't get a good look at who it was on the boat with him, but he was sure he saw somebody else moving around on the deck as it moved away from the shore. Now, this intrigued me. I had this idea he could be meeting a secret lover, but having met Mr. Bartholomew Sage myself, I doubted it. He was a strict man and seemed to be lacking in anything interesting to say. I did have a look at the local crime statistics, and they had been rather low recently. There had been no disappearances other than Mr. Sage's for over 2 months. I did wonder at the time whether these statistics would be considered low in any other community as small as ours. I guess now I know why people are going missing as often as they were. What I can't explain is why anybody stays here. I should have left. You should leave too, Priscilla. In fact, consider this a warning. I came to the conclusion that somebody had been waiting on his boat for him to take it out. They then killed him, dumped his body in the sea, came back and moored up the boat. It all seemed to tie together. I just needed to find out who it was waiting aboard the boat for him. His only living family were his son and his wife. His son, Ephraim, was just a boy who was distraught at his father's disappearance, a matter not helped by Mrs. Sage's callous nature. I didn't doubt that she herself had a capacity for kidnapping or even murder, but she seemed genuinely fond of her husband, so I could see no motive. Besides, why would she hire me to look into the case if she had committed the crime? It didn't make any sense, and as far as I could tell, nobody on the island held a grudge against him. Nobody seemed to particularly like or dislike the man. He existed without making any waves whatsoever, and I couldn't think of a worse thing to be remembered by, or not remembered by, as it is. The point was that nobody on the island seemed to have a motive. I did check in with the police. As a private eye, I had no authorization to read the evidence or police files, but of course, that never stopped me. I would slip a $5 to my old buddy, and he would send me a copy. There was one thing the files mentioned that his wife didn't. It seems like something they would question her about, so I was sure she was aware, but I could see why she didn't tell me. On his boat, they found a pale blue cloak with a dagger pattern embroidered onto the fabric. I didn't know the significance of the cloak, but I doubted it was a fashion statement. Most of my theories started to revolve around cults. Maybe Bartholomew planned to sacrifice the mystery figure and they fought back. Or maybe the figure was part of the cult and they decided to off one of their own. Or maybe the cloak belonged to the figure rather than Mr. Sage. I had 101 theories and no idea how to follow them up. There was no record of cults on the island, and the only person who claimed they existed was my wife's ex-co-worker, Arthur Smith, who was fired for incompetence after submitting dozens of articles with baseless accusations. Everybody said Arthur was crazy, though. Unless I wanted to listen to a madman rant about cults, it was fair to say I had hit a dead end. His wife offered to let me take out the boat, and I decided, well, I might as well. I doubted it would help, but I was running out of ideas. I had been on boats before, and I had never seen anything. All the monsters I had seen were on the island. I had no idea what waits underneath the surface. You peer down, and all that reflects is a calm, familiar face. How could I have known? But I should have known. How could I have been so stupid? The boat jolted away from the docks, and I was suddenly so aware that I was following in a dead man's footsteps. Still, I made myself keep going. It was one of those days where you rarely got a glimpse at the sun, the colourless day. It hadn't yet begun raining, but the dark clouds were certainly threatening to do so, and the ocean winds brought in a sharp chill with it. As the boat sailed further away from my safety, I found my visibility lessened and lessened. A mist cloaked itself around me, and the sky seemed to grow so prematurely dark for a granted somewhat chilly November day. It was still early afternoon, and it shouldn't have been getting dark for at least another 3 more hours. I hugged my jacket closer, wrapping my arms around the old leather, wishing I had brought the padded coat with me. The green one Charlotte had bought me for my last birthday. It was a lovely coat. I rarely wore it, but I often found myself wishing I had it with me. I think I would always assume that it was going to be too warm for it. Ever the optimist. And then the boat's engine cut out. I was trapped on the boat, at least 1.5 nautical miles out, and the only person who knew I was out here was a suspect in a missing persons case. It was then I realised just how still the water was. I peered over the side of the boat, my own face staring back at me. Did my own lips curl at the edges like the reflection, or was it a trick of the waters? I did the only thing I could. I picked up an oar and began to paddle the boat back in the direction it had come. I paddled for goodness knows how long. My eyelids began to feel quite heavy. Shapes rose and fell and squirmed and writhed in the mist around me. I was imagining things. I pulled the oar into the boat and rested my eyes for just a moment. And when I opened them again, I found myself somewhere else. No, not somewhere. Nowhere. I was nowhere. The ground was soft, and it seemed to shift under my feet. There were no walls, there was no sky, only darkness. I took a step forward, and I got the distinct feeling I hadn't moved anywhere. There was light, but no source. I could see, but only so far. Just outside of my vision, something shifted. I tried to walk towards it, but I was just stepping on the same spot over and over again. It was hopeless. Something laughed. Another voice joined the first, and then another and another. I knew this laughter, and I knew this place. I came to this place every time I drifted into sleep, but had never seen the things attached to the voices. No shadows, no shapes in the dark, no movement. "What do you want from me?" I asked. I always asked this. They had never replied before.
We want your mind, your soul. We want your dreams and eternity.
They said in unison. And then they squirmed in and out of darkness, and I saw them. All of them, their faces, their bodies, their minds, open for me to see. And in them I saw everything. The world, every world, and the spaces in between. I saw all the people and the monsters that hide in the dark, and I knew, once and for all, everything I had convinced myself was in my imagination was real. All the times I had been told I was making things up, all the times I... I awoke screaming and found myself still curled in the bottom of the boat. In my haze, I had dropped one of the oars into the sea, but I still clutched onto the other one in my hand. I couldn't tell where I was. The fog was still so thick I couldn't see anything other than a couple of meters. But I picked a direction and I rowed. The mist swirled in such a way that it looked like there were things moving and watching. They couldn't be, I told myself. Those things, they weren't real. They just couldn't be real. Not in my world. But that's just it, isn't it? This isn't my world. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't owe me anything. Never has. I rowed and I rowed for hours and for days and for weeks, and I was certain I must be somewhere out in the middle of the sea. I thought I would die out there. I think I had resigned myself to the idea, and that's when I saw it. Just as I gave up ever finding my way home, I saw land. It felt like it took hours to reach, when in reality I'm sure it was just but minutes. I moored the boat and I stepped ashore, excited to find my home and see my wife and my 2 beautiful children. I had missed them so much. But everything here was grey. I put this down to the fog and the dim light. I could see no people. I hoped everyone was just at home, since it was such a miserable day. Then I got to the high street. Not a single light was on. The windows were empty, and I could hear a thump, thump, thump. I wandered further down the street and noticed the door to Milton's music shop banging against the wall. A bulb flickered, lighting up the sign to the Cloak and Dagger, and then it died altogether. From behind me, I could hear it. Something so familiar. It was like an innate fear clambering up my spine. I turned and I saw it, clear as day. It stood before me. It wore the face of a girl. I did not recognize the face, but somehow I felt as if I had seen it before. It smiled a smile that looked wrong. Maybe it looked lopsided, or she was smiling too widely. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, or the way her limbs looked. Twisted. Like being with broken bones, yet somehow standing.
Christopher, come with me.
No, I told her, backing away as she strode towards me.
I am an impatient person, my dear Christopher.
You are not a person. She laughed, a dry, scratchy laugh.
What gave it away? Was it my smile? Or is it that you can see what lies beneath the skin? I am the thing that crawled inside and killed everything that once was.
Who are you?
I am the skinwalker, the mind killer. I am nothing and I am everything.
I ran. I hid and I ran. But she knew where I was. She always knew where I was, not just her, they all knew. And I remembered something. Imagine a piece of paper, and on this paper, somebody has drawn a stick man. And next to the stick man, they have drawn a square with a triangle on top to represent a house. And in this square is another stick man. And there are no doors or windows or gaps in the walls at all. Now, we can see that there is a stick man inside the house and another outside. But from the perspective of the stick man outside the house, he can't possibly know there is already somebody inside the house, as he can't see it. Now the same goes for the stick man inside the house. He can't possibly know that there is a man outside the house, as he can't see outside. Neither stick man will ever be able to fully comprehend that there are other people who could see both of them, the way we do, because we live in the third dimension. If I put my finger on the page and then took it off again and put it somewhere else on the page, it would appear to the stick man as if I am vanishing at will. What I am saying to you is, I felt an awful lot like that stick man. I spent years like that, on an empty imitation of my home. I refused to go with them. That is, until they threatened to come for my family. It was then I went, leaving behind my wife, Charlotte, and my 8-year-old son, Charlie, and my 6-year-old daughter, Priscilla. No, this isn't right. This can't be right. I don't have a father. I never had a father. I've only ever had one parent, a mother. This is a joke. I don't have a father. I don't. This is a joke.
You know it's not.
What do you want?
We are growing stronger, Priscilla, and they will show you.
Why? What are they doing?
You should leave now, Priscilla. This is my final warning.
What? I can't just leave. I have friends and family, and this is my home. I can't leave. Who are you? Tell me who you are. Why are you here?
The moon is waxed and the sky is wide. Close your eyes and stay inside. Bury your morality, it's fun, I've tried. Ensure you're prepared for Hericide. The parade of gods and devils is soon upon us. Get your affairs in order, all of you. Sleep well, dear listeners. The voice of Priscilla Phantom is Lyndsey Evans. The voice of Christopher was Robert Williams. The voice of Trix, the demon, is myself, Sasha K Williams. The Phantom Myth was written, edited, and produced by Sasha K Williams. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Well, you know what they say, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and moves like a cow. That is not a duck. Have a fine day.